Imagine walking into the most exclusive event of the year on the arm of someone you think represents everything you've accomplished. You feel untouchable. You feel like you've made it. And then a woman descends a staircase, and in that single moment, every calculation you've ever made about your own importance evaporates. Because that woman is your ex-wife. And she's not the quiet librarian who you convinced yourself held you back. She's the queen of everything. And what happens in the next few hours will be the most brutally honest conversation of your life. This is the story of a man who finally sees himself through someone else's eyes, and it breaks him open in the best possible way. December, Washington, D.C. An invitation printed on cream-colored cardstock so heavy it feels like ivory, gold lettering, an embossed seal showing an eagle gripping both a rose and a sword. This is an invitation to the Ashford Gala, the kind of event that doesn't appear in society pages because the people hosting it don't need publicity. They're the kind of wealthy that shapes markets without ever appearing in them. Rumor says their trust owns stakes in 11 Fortune 500 companies. Rumor says they've advised American presidents from rooms that never appeared in official photographs. And tonight, Ethan Carter, the son of an electrician from Cleveland, has been invited inside. He's been climbing for 20 years. Every handshake, every deal, every late night at the office calculated to mean something. And now, finally, it's paying off. He looks at himself in the mirror. Expensive suit, expensive watch, and on his arm tonight, Savannah, 24 years old, 400,000 social media followers, beautiful in the way expensive things are beautiful. Polished, symmetrical, deliberately assembled. She's the proof he needs. Proof that he has arrived. Proof that the working-class kid from Ohio has become somebody. They walk through the iron gates together. Savannah immediately pulls out her phone. She takes a picture. She uploads it before they've even entered the building. That's who she is. That's perfect. That's exactly what he needs her to be. The palace is magnificent. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, an orchestra playing classical music that drifts through vast halls like a whisper. Servers move with perfect precision, champagne glasses balanced on silver trays. The crowd inside is nothing like the parties Ethan has attended before. These aren't people trying to impress. These are people who have never had to try. Multi-generational wealth, land ownership that goes back centuries, the kind of power that doesn't need to announce itself because the room already knows who you are. Ethan feels it immediately, a shift in his confidence, a tightening in his chest. These people move differently. They speak differently. There's no performance here. But Savannah doesn't feel it. She's already looking for interesting backgrounds for photos. She wants to approach a senator she spotted. He tells her no. She pouts. She recovers quickly. She always does. At 8:30, a single note sounds through the ballroom. A low, resonant tone. Everything stops. Conversations die. Glasses lower. Every face turns toward the grand staircase. The lights shift. Golden. Expectant. And she appears at the top of the stairs. His first impression is stillness. Not frozen, not posed, but still the way things are still that don't need to move because attention comes to them without effort. She wears white, not bridal white, winter white, the white of clean paper, the white of first snow before anyone has walked through it. Her gown is simple. Genuinely expensive things are simple. Not a single unnecessary detail. No crown, no tiara, just a strand of pearls. She descends the staircase and the room moves with her. Senators incline their heads. Billionaires step back. A decorated general with more medals than Ethan can count actually gives a small bow. And then she turns. He sees her face. The glass in his hand drops 3 inches before he catches it. Because standing at the bottom of that staircase, being bowed to by everyone in this room, is Eleanor. His Eleanor. Eleanor Hayes, his ex-wife. The woman in the gray sweater who spent her weekends restoring damaged pages of 19th century poetry in a small Boston library that smelled like old paper. The woman he called boring in front of his friends. The woman he said had no ambition, no spark, no understanding of what real life looked like. She was his entire world once. And then he decided she wasn't good enough. He had outgrown her. He needed someone younger, louder, someone who performed happiness instead of actually living it. So he left her. 3 years ago. He never looked back. Except he did look back. He looked back every time he saw something quiet and thoughtful and real, and he reminded himself why it wasn't enough. Ethan tries to speak. His mouth forms words that have no sound. Savannah leans close. Who is she? She's stunning. He can't answer. Eleanor reaches the base of the staircase. She pauses, and across 50 feet of marble floor and 100 chattering conversations, she finds him. Their eyes meet. Eleanor smiles. It's not warm. It's not cold. It's the smile of someone who has known this moment would come and has simply been patient enough to wait for it. To anyone else, what happens next sounds like graciousness. She turns to the room. She welcomes the guests. She accepts a champagne glass from a waiting attendant. But Ethan understands the language underneath the words. The precise angle of her head, the way her eyes move through the room and occasionally find his. This is not a welcome. This is an announcement. She knows he's here. She expected him to be here. And this entire evening was designed for him to see her exactly like this. The next hour is the longest of his life. He circles the room with Savannah on his arm, performing normalcy while his mind runs calculations he can't complete. Eleanor Hayes, Queen of the Ashford dynasty. That's not possible. That defies everything he thought he knew about her. She was ordinary. That had been the entire problem. Ordinary sweaters, an ordinary job at an ordinary library, ordinary Friday nights with tea and books and public radio. He had escaped that. He had clawed his way to something better. At 9:15, a bell announces dinner. The crowd moves to the dining room. Ethan's seat is 7 chairs from Eleanor, close enough to feel her presence, far enough to experience the distance. Savannah immediately asks who that woman is. He tells her her name. She stares at him. Wait, Eleanor? That Eleanor? The librarian? The one you said was boring? That's her. Savannah goes quiet. For once in her entire life, Savannah has nothing to say. During dinner, Eleanor picks up her wine glass. She speaks to the room in a carrying voice. She welcomes one particular guest. She looks directly at him. Welcome, Mr. Carter. I have been looking forward to this evening for quite some time. The room offers a polite murmur of acknowledgement. To anyone who doesn't know, it sounds like hospitality. Ethan understands it for what it actually is. A warning, a promise, a declaration. At 10 o'clock, Eleanor speaks to him directly. She's standing beside him at the bar, close enough that he can smell something floral. Jasmine, maybe, or something older and more expensive than jasmine. Her eyes are the same as he remembers. Dark brown, quiet, watchful. The kind of eyes that notice things without appearing to. Ethan, she says, not a question, just his name offered back to him like something she's been holding for a while. He can barely speak. She tells him some things take time to arrange. Some things take exactly as long as they need to. She asks about Savannah. He confirms they're together. She says Savannah is lovely. Her tone is completely neutral. She tells him to enjoy the evening. They'll have a chance to talk properly later. Then she leaves. And Ethan stands at the bar feeling, for the first time in years, that he has said entirely the wrong thing. At 11:30, Marcus Webb appears at his elbow. There's a private gathering in the East Wing, a few key people. He's been included on the list. Ethan asks who invited him. Marcus looks at him steadily. Who do you think? They walk down a corridor lined with portraits he doesn't have time to examine. Through unmarked doors, into a room that is warm and book-lined and smells faintly of cedar and old paper. The smell stops him cold. Because Eleanor's library in their Boston apartment smelled exactly like this. There are 8 people in the room. The Forbes man, a federal judge, 4 others he doesn't recognize. All of them have the particular ease of people accustomed to rooms where decisions are made. And Eleanor stands near the fireplace. She's changed nothing about herself. Same white gown, same single strand of pearls. But without the audience of 500 people around her, the effect is different, more concentrated. She fills the room not with volume, but with presence. She says she wants to speak plainly. There are things that need to be said before the evening continues. And then she tells him. The Ashford dynasty is her maternal inheritance, a lineage of quiet, deliberate power building in America for 170 years. Her mother kept it private, not out of shame, out of strategy. When the Ashford name becomes celebrity news, it becomes something different, visible, vulnerable, available for public consumption. Eleanor grew up knowing who she was. She knew her birth carried weight and responsibility. When she took the job at the Boston Library, it was a deliberate choice. She loved books. She loved the silence of careful work. She loved the way a damaged page, given time and the right tools, could be made whole again. She had not been pretending to be ordinary. She had been choosing to live as a person rather than as a symbol. And then she met Ethan. She pauses here. He feels the pause like a hand pressing against his chest. I loved you, she says simply, without drama, the way you state a fact about the physical world. That's the foundation you need to understand what I'm about to tell you. This is not about revenge, it's about truth. When their marriage began unraveling, Eleanor did what she always did with things that mattered. She paid attention, she watched, she waited. And while she waited, she made phone calls, quiet ones, through channels that had nothing to do with the Boston Library or the life they shared on the surface. The Ashford Royal Trust made strategic investments in the firm where Ethan worked. Nothing dramatic, nothing visible, just enough to stabilize the company during a difficult quarter, which stabilized his position, which enabled the promotion that he believed was the result of his own brilliance and determination. Ethan's face drains of color. You funded my career. I funded nothing, she corrects. The trust made investments that benefited you. While we were still married. Yes. Why? Because I loved you, she says simply. And you needed it. And I could provide it. That is what people do for the people they love, Ethan. They use what they have. He turns away from her. He faces the fire. He stares into it. The room is completely silent. After the divorce, Eleanor continues addressing his back. The trust continued the investments. At that point, not out of love, but out of interest. The company performed well, and she became, through normal processes of acquisition, a controlling stakeholder. He turns around slowly. You own my company? Yes. You own the firm I work for? Yes. Since when? 14 months ago. 14 months. He has been operating for 14 months inside a company that his ex-wife owns, going to board meetings, presenting projections, making decisions, shaking hands, and presenting himself as a man at the height of his powers inside her company. Does anyone else know? The board knows, she says. They've known since the acquisition. They were instructed to allow normal operations to continue. Instructed. He repeats the word like it's foreign. Yes. He looks around the room at the carefully sympathetic faces watching him. Not a single one shows surprise. They all knew before he walked in. This gathering has been assembled to watch him understand this exact moment. She tells him about an acquisition he negotiated 6 months ago. The Meredith deal. The biggest of his career. He led it personally. Every metric suggested triumph. The board celebrated. His name appeared in 3 financial publications. He framed the coverage, put it in his office. He was so proud. Eleanor tells him he was wrong. About everything. The Meredith board wasn't motivated by expansion. They were motivated by survival. They were carrying $17 million in undisclosed liability on 2 legacy properties. The real negotiation was about debt relief, not market share. The trust's analysts identified it in the 2nd week of due diligence. Eleanor tells him if he'd known about those properties, he could have structured the deal differently, Could have saved the company significantly. She could have told him. She didn't. She watched him proceed without the information. And she watched him celebrate a victory that was actually a loss. And she let him walk around believing in a triumph that wasn't real. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asks, and his voice has gone to a place it hasn't been all evening. Quiet, stripped of its usual architecture. "Because I wanted to see what you would do with incomplete information," she says. "You always believed you were the smartest person in any room. I wanted to understand whether that was something you'd earned or something you'd simply been allowed." She pauses. "The answer was more complicated than I expected. You're intelligent, Ethan. I've never thought otherwise. But intelligence without humility moves in circles. It solves the problems it can see and walks straight into the ones it can't. It sees a woman in a gray sweater and calls her ordinary and misses the person underneath completely. He pushes all his chips forward. "All in," he says to the room. They're in a poker game now. Eleanor calls. He lays down 2 pairs. She shows 3 queens. The chips move to her side. And Ethan sits back in his chair and feels something in him give way. Some final structure that's been holding since the moment he walked through the palace gates. He stays to watch the rest of the game, but he doesn't pick up any more cards. At 1 in the morning, there are only 2 people left in the room, Ethan and Eleanor. The cards are squared on the table. The room is quiet. She looks at him across the empty chairs and scattered chips, and everything that has happened between them over the course of one long, devastating, illuminating evening. She asks him if he wants to know the hardest part. He says yes. "The hardest part," she says quietly, "wasn't the things you said. It wasn't even watching you arrive tonight with her on your arm, looking like you had won something. The hardest part was knowing the entire time that you were capable of being someone extraordinary and choosing every single day to be someone ordinary instead. And calling it ambition." The words move through him like something physical. He has no answer. For the first time in his adult life, Ethan Carter sits in a room with a person who knows him, actually completely knows him without flattery or illusion, and he has absolutely nothing to say. He stays in that chair. Eleanor watches him make that choice and says nothing. She waits. That's what she's always done. Waited. With a patience he once called passivity and now recognizes as something else entirely. It's the discipline of someone who understands that the most important things cannot be rushed, only prepared for. He asks if the investments were about hurting him. She considers the question. "No," she says, "not in the way you mean. I didn't do any of it to cause you pain. I did it because I was paying attention, because that's what I do with things I care about, even things I've already lost." Later, Ethan finds the courtyard behind the east wing. Eleanor told him about it. "If you need air that isn't crowded." The temperature has dropped. Snow lies undisturbed on stone benches. The hedges are outlined in white. It's the middle of the night, and he's standing in a December courtyard with his ex-wife, with his entire life rearranged. And for the first time in years, he's asking the right questions. He asks if she forgave him a long time ago. She says yes. That's not what tonight was about. Then what was tonight about? She tells him it was about her needing to see him in her world, on her terms. Not because she wanted to humiliate him, but because for 3 years she existed in his version of events. The woman he left, the librarian who couldn't keep up. She needed, just once, in a room full of people who know who she is, to be seen clearly, to have the real story visible. He asks if there's any chance they could have, if things were different. He can't finish. Eleanor looks at him with an expression that is tender and clear and entirely without ambiguity. "No," she says gently, "and I think you know that. And I think part of you is relieved, even if another part of you is not." He exhales, some remaining hope, some surviving fantasy, some version of the story where tonight ends differently. He lets it go into the cold air and watches it disappear. She tells him nothing changes tomorrow at work. He goes to work. He does his job. But what changes is him. Hopefully. And if it doesn't, decisions will be made by people who have the full picture. But she doesn't think that's what will happen. She thinks he's more capable of genuine change than he's ever allowed himself to be. Because change requires admitting you were wrong. And that's always been the thing he's found hardest. 2 years later, Ethan Carter lives in a small apartment in Chicago. It's smaller than his New York penthouse. It has a kitchen with a window that looks onto a courtyard, and a bookshelf that is genuinely, disorganizingly full of books he has actually read. He works. The literacy program. He drives to the centers 2 mornings a week. He sits in rooms with adults who are learning what most people take for granted. He helps in whatever small, concrete ways he can. He is not happy in the loud, performed way he once pursued happiness. He is something quieter and more durable than that. Something that holds. He's dated 2 women briefly, both kind, both real in the way he only recently learned to recognize and value. Neither developed into more. He doesn't force it. He's learning slowly that patience is not weakness, that being still is not the same as being lost. Savannah built something remarkable. She pivoted from lifestyle content to a platform about authenticity. She has 4 times the followers. She occasionally posts about a night in Washington that changed her without naming names. Those posts reach furthest. They had coffee once, 8 months after the gala. It was easy and honest. They parted as people who genuinely wished each other well and had no interest in revisiting what had passed between them. Eleanor appeared on the cover of a national magazine, the first interview she ever gave. She spoke about stewardship, about power that serves itself versus power that serves something larger. She didn't mention the gala. She didn't mention him. She didn't need to. He bought the magazine, kept it in the drawer of his nightstand, where he keeps things that matter. There's one sentence he's read so many times, he doesn't need the page to find it. When asked the truest measure of a person's character, Eleanor said, whether they can be changed by the truth. This story isn't about revenge, it's about mirrors. It's about what happens when someone you thought you knew stops hiding and finally shows you who they actually were all along. It's about the devastating realization that you didn't lose something ordinary. You threw away something extraordinary. And the only thing worse than losing it is having to watch it thrive without you. But here's what makes this story beautiful. It's not a tragedy. Because Eleanor didn't destroy Ethan. She didn't humiliate him. She told him the truth. Precisely, completely, in a room full of people who could witness it. And then she walked back into her own extraordinary life and left him to decide what to do with what she'd given him. Every single day after that, he decided again. That's the work. Not a single dramatic transformation, not a climactic moment of redemption, just the small, daily, unglamorous choice to be honest, with himself, with the people around him, with the distance between who he had been and who he was slowly becoming. So here's my question for you. If someone you loved finally told you the complete truth about yourself, not the version you wanted to hear, the actual truth, would you have the courage to listen? Would you be willing to change? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know. If this story moved you, if you felt the power in Eleanor's quiet strength, if you found yourself rooting for a man to finally wake up to who he actually is, hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to understand that the most powerful thing you can do is tell the truth. Subscribe because we're bringing you stories about people who refuse to perform their lives anymore. Real stories, honest stories, stories about transformation that starts with telling the truth and continues one small choice at a time. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.